what's up, guys? Welcome to Two Americas. I am Nzinga.
I'm Scott. What's going on?
Scott, you ever been arrested?
Close.
What happened?
I got put in handcuffs along with some other little skater grommet friends of mine back in San Clemente, California. Because they saw us like grinding on the curb at a bank. And they like, that's destruction of property. That's vandalism. We could take you guys in. And they gave us the whole finger pointy lecture. And, you know, like sitting there, little red eyes, kind of scared.
Did you cry?
Little hands behind our back. Nah, because I knew what he was doing.
Did they put you in handcuffs?
They put a couple of the kids in handcuffs, and then they like threatened to put me in handcuffs because I think they knew I was the good kid who wasn't going to go anywhere. They kind of let me off, just let me sit there.
Was it a bunch of white kids?
A couple white, a couple Hispanic.
Of course. That's why you didn't get arrested.
I think we didn't get arrested because it was a small town, and they knew that all they had to do was like stick the law in our face real hard, and we'd probably behave for a few weeks.
Well, let me tell you something. According to America right now, if you were all black kids, you all would have been shot.
I'm surprised you're not dead. You made it to 30?
I've never had an encounter with the cops. As a matter of fact, cops like me. They give me thumbs up.
Is it because you don't constantly break the law?
No, it's because I walk down the street and I'm cute.
Because you're cute. So it's your internalized white privilege you're using against you.
They know I'm white inside. That's what it is.
All right. It's because you're an Oreo.
So the reason I bring up the cops is because you heard about what happened in Compton.
All right. So we got, two Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputies. Attempted assassination. Shot through the face. 31-year-old mother of a boy of 6.
Yep.
A couple shots in the arms. And then she had to render first aid to her newly sworn-in deputy, who was, I believe, 24.
24.
He'd also received similar wounds.
Yep.
And, they had to fight through that. There's some really great photos of this. And I guess the assailant was like 28 to 30-year-old black man wearing black clothing, kind of runs off from the scene. That's all we have so far. And there's just there's a manhunt underway, $100,000 reward. $25,000, I believe, of which is provided by the League of like United Latino something in LA, and then some of it I think was even provided by some of the hospital people. I could be wrong on that one. That's worth a fact check, but pretty brutal stuff. And working in law enforcement myself, I can definitely feel the feels on that one.
Right, and the thing is you calling it an assassination is not hyperbole.
No.
I mean, if you watch the video, the guy goes up, and the way it looks like it's something out of a movie. Sure,
and we've seen this before. We've heard about this in Chicago. We've heard about this in L.A. before this, New York, Texas.
Right.
During Obama's administration. I mean, there's crimes in progress where a cop tries to intercept. Maybe he's chasing you down.
Right.
Maybe he pops into a domestic dispute, and then you get kind of hit in the crossfire of what was already going on. They're trying to escape, and so they try to shoot you to escape. Yeah, I mean, it's still attempted murder, it's still this, it's still assault with a deadly weapon and all that stuff. But when you're just kind of sitting there, like,
eating
listening to the radio and having a little chit-chat, maybe eating a burrito, and some guy rolls up to your window who hasn't engaged with you, doesn't know who you are, and then just starts mowing you, like, that's an assassination.
Right. For sure.
I think the reason we use assassination is because the language itself is politically charged.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They're being killed for a reason. And it's not just because I hate cops. Right? This guy, whoever he was, had to have a real powerful motivation to roll up to that car and shoot 2 cops who weren't ready for him and try to kill them. And that takes some strong ideological belief, because now he's running the risk of becoming, suspect numero uno.
Right.
With a lot of real angry, some of them not so nice cops out there who probably are corrupt. And he has to worry about his behind getting caught and thrown into jail and prison for the rest of his life, assuming he makes it there. So he had to have some real strong inclinations to pull that crap.
I guess the question is where does that come from? Like that amount of hate, and you're not in an altercation. They didn't show up on the scene of some domestic violence attempt, like the one guy with the knife. He was already pissed. He was already like Mr. Stabby. Yeah,
like, apparently in 2019. We're talking about the guy, the other viral video where, for the people who are kind of like trying to keep up with our little rabbit trails.
Right.
I believe the guy's nothing like Ruiz or Munez, 29-year-old guy, constantly stabbing people. Essentially, apparently stabbed like 4 people back in 2019. One of them a teenager. This guy was known for aggravated assault with a weapon. And then same thing happens. He gets called to, the police get called to a domestic dispute. The woman comes outside. He comes charging out with a knife, jumping in the air, making a war face, acting insane. This cop literally tries to run away. And you can see in the badge cam footage, he's running away, kind of shoots on the run, puts the guy down. And this is what lights up Lancaster, Pennsylvania with riots. And it's just like, that is the definition of a good shoot. There's no controversy. Case closed.
Because, he was running away, and first of all, it was a really good shot. Because he was...
He had to do that one on the sly with some crazy guy screaming and jumping in the air with a big old knife.
From behind like that, everyone learns how to shoot this way.
Yeah, while standing still.
And standing still. He's running, shooting behind, and gets the guy.
He's got an extra from like a Road Warrior movie, jumping in the air, screaming with a knife.
First of all, excellent shot. I hate that the guy got hurt, but he brought it on himself.
I don't.
You don't care?
No, I'm good with him not being around anymore.
I'm clearly more
I feel like the world's a little better off. There are oxygen thieves, and I'm okay when they go away. But I think the topic that we were hoping to kind of dive into today was be a little bit less of just a recap of things people can easily glom onto on the internet. I think people want to hear from us specifically, why do people buck authority so hard, specifically in the black community, and where does this come from, and how do we solve it?
It's interesting because I can remember being a teenager and feeling that need to buck up against every bit of authority that came to me.
Now, I think a part of that is just simply being that age.
Sure.
But it feels like to me, from what I've witnessed, that sort of prolonged adolescence and that desire to buck authority becomes part of the black identity.
I was going to say, it wasn't because I was a teenager, though. It wasn't because I don't want to follow the rules. That's lame. It had to do with my race.
Really?
It did.
And who instilled that in you? Because I've met your mother, and she's not one of those anti-cop types.
No, she's not. It's got to come through. Man, this is interesting because I'm trying to figure it out now, live on air, and I don't really know. I can't tell you a specific time where I heard something or someone said something to me or taught me something specific that I should not listen to any authority whatsoever.
So you just kind of pick it up by osmosis. Like it just kind of creeps into your skin from media, from social media, from talking to people over the years, from music, from television.
It's got to be a little bit from music. It's got to be a little bit from the whole black American culture that I was like really, really into. Because I told you I had a really big crush on The Game. Mm-hmm. I thought he was awesome. And now I'm like...
Well, I mean, like F the Police being one of like the seminal works of the hip hop genre. You know, when you think about that.
I mean,
where everything glorifies crime and plays cops as pigs. I mean,
right? Because there would be lines in different rap songs that would say things like that. You know, like F the police, or you're running from the police, or the police are the bad guys.
See, because like you're an interesting case. Because if I were to talk to like some of my other friends from Los Angeles who actually grew up in like real bad areas and actually dealt with some of these really unfortunate circumstances growing up, I could understand some of their bitterness. Mm-hmm. And they may have actually even had some run-ins with law enforcement here and there that weren't so kosher, right? So it's kind of like, well, my life already stinks. This is just another aspect of everything that's corrupt. I have no reason to respect them, blah, blah, blah. I still don't respect that position, but I can at least understand the mentality. With you, it's interesting because you have literally no reason to not like cops, and you have literally no reason to not obey authority because you have no bad examples. Right?
I'll tell you what I think it is. It dawned on me just a second ago. I think it comes from the idea that because I'm black, I have it worse off in this country. And then authority is what is bringing me down.
So you see, it's kind of like the restaurant effect. So I was explained this by a manager who was doing like a training session when I was working at one of these like commercial restaurants. I won't name which one. I think I was like 19 at the time, and I was just training to be a server. And he said, he's like, once you put on the uniform, you're no longer Mary, Scott, Nzinga. You're now an appendage of such and such corporation, whether it be Darden Restaurants or something like that. And people will treat you differently. We keep the badge on there to try and humanize you, but at the end of the day, they're not going to look at it very often, especially in these sort of turn and burn environments at certain restaurants. They're just going to see you as an appendage of the fact that their food is slightly cold. They're going to see you as an extension of their frustration that the bar took a long time to make their margarita. And so you're just there to facilitate their anger, their needs, their wants, and their desires. And you're also there to be yelled at and to kind of eat the crap that comes your way. and hopefully you still get a tip out of it. So I think that cops are just a more extreme example of that. I think that there's probably like a big chunk of the population who looks at cops and says, you know, thank you for your service, you're keeping us safe, great, we'll help you if we can, but, you know, protect me. And then I think there's a big chunk of the population who believes that they're basically like somebody working at one of these restaurants, and they have been failing at their job for so many decades, and they literally deserve nothing but scorn and bullets.
It's interesting. I had a conversation a few years ago. I was taking classes at the time, and I was studying in the library. And this young black girl comes up to me. She just sits down, and she starts talking to me about joining her on this quest. And it was a quest to, I guess, get black people out of the thumb, or from underneath the thumb of some sort of tyranny from white people. And she goes on, she talks for about 20 minutes, and I just let her talk, and I just sat there and listened. And I said, so what is your solution to all this? And her solution was that we, meaning the Negroes, we all pack up and we move to Africa off the grid and live off the grid, like, I guess, off the land.
We already tried this. It's called Liberia.
What?
By the way, for any of you thinking about doing this, go ahead and look up the Liberian experiment and see what happened to that government, and you'll change your mind.
Look that up. I'll look it up later myself, because I don't know what you're talking about.
Basically, they took all the worst lessons of the slave owners and just went back and applied them to their own people.
Oh, excellent. So we had this conversation, and then I started to talk to her about Jesus, obviously, and where I get my identity from, which is the Word of God. And I tried to befriend her and talk to her about the gospel and freedom in Jesus and blah, 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 blah. And one time, she looks at one of my friends who's a good-looking, dark-skinned brother, and she starts talking to him about the same stuff, which we'd already discussed several times. And so she had kind of a strong personality, and so I'm having to come at her hard. And so I'm asking her all these questions that she can't answer. And one of those questions was, who are the people that are oppressing us? Who are they? I said, you need to be able to name names, because you can't just say we're being oppressed and then there's just some ghost out there of a cabal of white folks oppressing us.
Well, I mean, this is the implicit bias training stuff. It's this idea of, oh, well, it's just in your head and you're born with it or something like that. And so there's nothing you can do. So therefore you're tainted, and you have to sit down and shut up and listen to me or pay me more or give me a job. It's just a hustle.
Right.
That's really all it is. Like when I look at all these race activists, all I'm seeing is people literally holding, appeasing white people upside down by their ankles and shaking them for change. That's all I see.
Yeah.
Just a bunch of hustlers looking for cheap change because they know that they can get people to feel guilty for something that they haven't done. And just shake them for change. I mean, that's been Al Sharpton and his whole shtick for a long time. Jesse Jackson. They basically just shake down corporations with, we're gonna come at you and call you racist and protest and that sort of stuff, or you can throw us a little money to fund our organization. And these corporations are like, well, we got the money, so we might as well stay out of that quagmire. And here you go. Here's some free cash for a little shakedown. And it's a protection racket. It's just a modified version of it. And this stuff's existed for eons.
Let me tell you how much I hate that white guilt thing. I cannot stand the white guilt thing.
Makes us look weak, doesn't it?
It does, and it makes you weak. I have a friend who works at a very left-leaning organization, and she can't post anything on Facebook. She can't post anything on any social media platform that leans to the right one iota, or she will not be spoken to the next day.
So she can pretty much only sing like the Soviet national anthem and like post things about Lenin.
She can only post puppies and like kittens doing
just
funny things.
BuzzFeed-less.
Oh my gosh, it's bad. And I was telling her, like, you need to man up. And I said, you gotta stop feeling guilty, because that's how they get you. Because she was making a joke with this other black person at her job, and he said something, stereotypical about white people to her. And so she said something about fried chicken to him. The outrage that came out of those people was insane. And they were all white. And she says, Nzinga, I know for a fact that none of them have black friends.
But that's where they get the biggest defense, right? It's like these rioters. You go out and you actually look at some of the footage of these riots. Yeah, there's plenty of black and other colored people mixed in there, but it's mostly white people doing all the destruction.
the ones getting arrested,
the
all
most
of the
violent,
mugshots.
vehement responses to quote unquote racism, or like in defense of like your people, will come from people pastier than me, who are in like some upper middle class strata. Like they just, how dare you? And I'm just like, you don't know any black people. Shut up.
Shut
Shut up.
And that's
Shut up,
demeaning
Karen.
in and of itself, because then it's like black people can't stand up for themselves.
Well, the thing that cracks me up too is that the black person isn't even offended most of the time. They're just like, that was a dumb joke, and then the white person's like, how dare you? You know, and I'm just over here and I'm thinking like, why don't you let Tyrone speak for himself, Karen?
How dare you?
Yeah.
Was that a good impression?
How dare you?
Greta.
You got to get the Swedish in it. You got to get the pigtails. Apparently that gives you scientific credibility if you have pigtails.
Oh, dang it.
Yeah. Your hair's not going to work that way. Not with those braids.
Crap.
Anyway, I think this is interesting because growing up in like a family with a dad who was a firefighter in Los Angeles County, you know, I'm already kind of in the blue-red thing. So for me, you know, sort of the paramilitary organizational bit, like we're already kind of patriotic. So to me, the idea of questioning authority was never really an option. Like my parents, you know, they'd always say, they're like, if you get arrested and it seems like it's not legit, or if the guy's like not following procedure, just keep your yap shut and we'll fight it in court, right? Like we'll bail you out and we'll deal with it then. You know, don't fight in the streets, you fight in the court. They're like, otherwise, assume that they're doing something they're supposed to be doing. Comply, help them. Because their job is difficult, dangerous, and they're doing a service for the rest of us. You know, you treat them with the respect and the honor that they're due. You know, it was the same thing with military. We assumed they were doing good, not evil. But nowadays, people have been so brainwashed, and especially, unfortunately, people in your community have been so brainwashed, it seems like putting on a uniform of any kind that even remotely looks law enforcement makes you like a bullet target, like a silhouette.
Well, it'll also have white kids yelling at you, telling you you're not black and you're a coon and you're Uncle Tom.
Yeah, lefties, and I don't understand it, because to me, just the profession, the nature of the profession, it deserves respect, because there's inherent danger there. There's a job that you're obviously not willing to do because you don't want to take the risk. It doesn't pay very well, and yet they do it anyway. The hours are grotesque. You know, the overtime they do is insane just to make sure that they have some kind of livable life. Their benefits ain't great, depending on which district you're talking about. And then they can get shot in the face like this, and people will go and protest them at the hospital and try to break in. And say that they hope that these notorious gangbangers and these, you know, these executioners and these murderers die, you know, die pigs die. And, you know, the mainstream media kind of poo-poos that a little bit. Like, oh, you know, this is inexcusable. But it could also be because of corruption. That you just literally made an excuse. It's not inexcusable anymore. You just made the excuse. You gave them a de facto reason to pull the trigger. With no evidence, by the way. This 31-year-old mother of a boy of 6 and this newly sworn-in deputy who was 24, I doubt either one of them were part of the dreaded executioner squad on the LA Sheriff's Department, this sort of shadow organization that goes around stomping gangbangers. I mean...
Yeah. Here's the other thing, too. And on top of that, the cops aren't the heroes anymore. It's the person who was doing the crime.
You know, something like Dan Bongino said. He's like, you know, it used to be morally fundamental to the logic of children that cops and robbers... Nobody wanted to be the robber. It was like the kid you didn't like. You'd be like, why do I have to be the robber? They'd be chasing around, bang, 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 with their sticks in their fingers, kind of chasing him down the street. Like now everybody wants to be the robber. No one wants to be the cop. All right, who's to blame for that? Like, how did we get so twisted? How did our moral center get so off kilter? You know, it's like the polar magnetism of the planet switch. And I don't understand it, and I don't respect it.
I don't understand it either. But here's another personal story. I've got cousins who are almost completely against the police, and they come against me and the family that I'm actually close to. They'll come against us because we're more conservative and we respect the police and so forth and so on. But me and my brother were talking about it, or me and my cousin, whoever it was, we were talking about it, and I said, but think about this for a second. These are the same people that have called the cops on their own brother several times.
I was about to say.
So they know who to call. I got interviewed by a local newspaper, and they ran my quote. It was amazing. I didn't think they would. And they named me. Nzinga Johnson said, 30 years old, says, well, when I'm in trouble, I know who to call. And everybody knows who to call. As a matter of fact, it is well known that if we actually do defund the police, there are certain areas who will just be raped by criminals.
Most of these organizations that represent like these low-income communities are clamoring for more police funding, clamoring for more police representation. It's only these extremists and their white buddies in the media who think they're doing the right thing by them who say the opposite.
Yeah.
And so more and more black people get victimized every time you defund the police. Every time you cut them out of these areas, more and more black victims pile up. So just like everything that liberals do, it has the opposite intended effect, and it hurts the very people that they're trying to save.
Right.
Every single time.
But it doesn't hurt them.
No, because they don't have any skin in the game. Mm-mm. I mean, it's like you get somebody like one of these people, these correspondents, these news correspondents. There's just no cost to them. Once you're in that echelon in your ivory tower, all you have to do is go back to your gated community or to your private, little secure building that you have to code into and go through 2 separate doors and get past a security guy to get to your floor. And the cops will show up a little quicker because you're on like the Upper East Side or something like that. Like, They don't live in the same reality as the black people they claim to represent.
They don't. Which mayor was it during the height of the riots that would not do anything about it, but then had the local police protect their house?
No, when you say riot, are you talking about like the '92 riots in Los Angeles?
No, I'm talking about recently.
Recently,
there was one of the mayors. I want to say
Lightfoot.
That
was mayor of Seattle.
Oh, and she had the local police guarding her home.
Jenny Durkin, I believe.
Yeah.
So yeah, she was all fine with Chaz Chop
yeah.
and the 4 bodies that piled
That's
up,
right.
and God knows all the other
Chaz
crimes that happened. But as soon as they started protesting in front of her house, she brought the hammer down hard, real quick.
Mm-hmm. The Speaker of the House in our state, he brought that up. Or not the Speaker of the House. I can't remember what his.
AJ Barr is
majority whip.
There's some stuff going around that he's trying to charge a lot of these protesters with sedition.
He should.
And that there's even some rumors circulating, I don't know how verifiable they are, that they're even thinking about charging Durkin and some of the other people because
he should. He should.
But here's what I don't understand. I still can't wrap my brain around it, even though I'm 35 years old and I've had this discussion multiple times, especially with people from like minority communities. If you're going to constantly call us and have us risk our lives intervening in your affairs, why do you hate us and also think it's okay when we get killed?
Because they're not morally consistent, and they don't stop and think for a second.
I mean, we get like piles and piles. If you had a call log of where all of the calls are coming from, they're coming from poor minority communities. It ain't the people in the middle class on the nice part of town that are calling the cops every 5 minutes because nothing happens, except for the occasional like domestic dispute or the kid who like cuts his thumb off goofing off in the yard on accident, or the one strange break-in noise that spooked Miss Carol, who, is a little easily spooked.
Karen.
You go to the low-income neighborhoods where you can hear what sound like firecrackers going off every single night of the week. That's where the majority of the calls are coming from. And guess what? They're also majority people of color. So those are the ones calling us in. But these are also the people that are saying, die, pigs, die, fry 'em like bacon, ACAB, all cops are bastards. And yet they're the ones filling the phone lines and keeping these operators busy, having us intervene on their behalf.
Well, you got to remember, too, a lot of those people are not politically aware. So I think it's mainly people who are a little bit more educated, and they're not necessarily the ones who are doing the calling all the time.
So again, it's that elitist.
Even the blacks.
The elitists who don't actually need the police saying that black people should hate the police. And then the black people who actually need the police are calling the police and going like, what?
I think the black ones that are, I'm thinking of something specific about an hour away from here. And this, I guess he's a preacher. I don't know. He sounded like a preacher. He was up speaking and he was talking about the police and their races and all the rest of it. And he seemed like someone to me who probably grew up in what you're talking about, but somewhere along the way he got out of it. But he's still like, but this is still my hood. I'm still your people, and I'm going to stand up for you. But he probably went to school somewhere. Mm. So I don't think it's necessary. Like, I'm thinking about people who are just worried about their kids. They've got their single mom. They have to call the cops because their boyfriend is trying to hit them. I don't think those are the ones watching the news and calling for defunding the police, because I don't even think that they think about that.
Mm-hmm. Sort of low information voters who are just trying to get by.
If they vote.
Yeah.
I don't think it's those people. I think it's blacks who went to college. Like I saw a video, and this girl was was arguing with these white people, and she starts yelling about how I am in college. I go to college, and she was literally talking like this. I go to college. I am getting a law degree, and I am here to tell you that systemic racism is alive and well. You could tell
trying way too hard.
Yeah, you could tell she was had a little bit of hood in her, but she went to college. And now she's an activist. I noticed that it's the black folks who are all of a sudden activists. They are the ones that actually go and vote and stuff. They're the ones that are out in the street talking about defunding the police.
They're like Scientologists who just had their thetans counted.
What?
Okay, never mind. You won't get the reference. Basically, they're in a cult. That's the implication.
Yeah. They get brainwashed in college, and all of a sudden they're activists, but it's for my people.
But now they speak for all black people, especially
Exactly.
the low-income ones. Meanwhile, the low-income ones are like, what?
Exactly.
I don't know what. I called the cops twice because my brother was popping off at a barbecue, firing live rounds.
The only times I remember dialing 911 is one time I saw an accident occur, and it was pretty bad. I called the cops for that. And then another time, there was these Hispanic people a few doors down from me, and they were playing that music so loud I could not sleep, and I had church in the morning.
Hater.
I was like, please ask them to turn
You're like, if
this
I have to
down.
hear any more of this
It was
accordion music, I'm going to lose my mind.
I mean, the same beat for an hour? No! But here's another thing I want to bring up. I want to get biblical for a second, because I think people get surprised at the consequences of not obeying authority and not listening to the cops. First of all, common sense without scripture. The guy with the gun, you listen to.
You know,
right?
Yeah, I mean, we live in the freest country in the world, one of the most successful countries in the history of humankind, and anybody can make something out of themselves with enough hard work and determination. And yet we're blaming the guys who make like $36,000 a year to wear a bulletproof vest and deal with your domestic BS. And you shoot the guy and you're like, no, that's what you get for being like a tyrant. It doesn't add up.
It doesn't. And it's not biblical. And apparently, supposedly, black Americans are like the last church group in America. So I'm going to get biblical. This is Romans 13, verse 4. For the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. Exchange sword for Glock, same thing. They are God's servants, agents of wrath to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. You can't be surprised if they have to pull out the sword, exchange it for Glock, whatever, if you're acting like an idiot and not being responsible.
Well, here's what boggles my mind, right? Because that sentiment makes a lot of sense. You know, it's like obey the authorities that are put over you, even if it's like tyrannical. You see it in the Bible. The Jews are constantly being punished for the wrongdoing for like 400 years at a time, and then God violently releases them and lets them have another shot. You know, we don't have anything that extreme going on. But we have people like Jacob Blake who digitally rape a woman while her kid's in the same bed, and then steals her car keys, and then she calls the cops, and he already has warrants out for other stuff. And then they show up, they have to fight with him, they try to tase him, that doesn't work, he throws them off, and then he goes to his car, threatens them, they hold him at gunpoint and say, just stop what you're doing, don't get anything out of the car, you know, and then he reaches in for a knife while his kids are in the car, and he gets shot 7 times, and everybody's angry about the number of shots, the fact that it was in his back. Why'd they have to shoot him in the first place? Shut up. Shut up. You have nothing to say about that. Nothing. You have nothing to say. You know nothing. You armchair quarterback MFers. You don't get to chime in on this. When people like that get glorified, and what was it, some soccer women's team was actually putting bullet holes on their shirts and kneeling for the national anthem over this guy? That guy is scum. And the Kamala Harris and her family going out there and praising him like he's some kind of hero, where they're eulogizing George Floyd, this guy who killed himself with fentanyl. These people are not heroes. They're bad people. They're people who cops are supposed to shoot so that they don't victimize innocent mothers while their kids are in the bed with them. Where did we get so twisted? Where did our morals fall so hard that people think that this is okay? And the narrative is all that matters. And this is why BLM is a terrorist organization and not an activist group who deserves no credence.
You can be sad that someone died and also understand that that person lived by the sword and unfortunately died by the sword.
Sure.
That's perfectly fine. That you can have that middle ground in that instance, But the hero worship, I have no idea where that comes from. I don't understand it.
I think it's just another way to stick the middle finger up at an authority.
Yep.
And I think it's just a way to, it doesn't even matter if you agree with him or not. Like, you may think Jacob Blake is scum yourself, but you know that to be on his team is to be against the things you hate more. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, oh, you know, whatever. Like, I'll prop him up a little bit just so we can get this done. It's disingenuous and cynical.
Yep, there's a motive behind it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, doesn't seem like we're going to be able to resolve that one. Obviously, that's going to be a consistent problem for as long as there's human beings.
Right.
But what I think, you know, what would you say as a black woman to people to kind of kill that mentality? Like, how did you kill it? How did you get past it?
I would say, I'll tell you exactly what I told the girl I was talking about earlier. I would say you need to reevaluate where you find your identity. I think too many black people, I think they put too much stock in their race. So, to the point where it doesn't matter how a person lived, the only thing they care about is who killed them.
Yeah.
And so I think you need to find your identity in something else. I would recommend the Lord, because there is no race. It's entirely spiritual. And He created you. He knows who He made you to be. And finding out what that is, and I think we've had this conversation before, when you find out what that is, you are on a mission. And there's nothing that can distract you, not your race, not your gender, not your none of those things. So that's what helped me, is I don't care what I look like. It's about, what am I here for? What is my purpose? What is my purpose on this earth? Why was I born? When you find that, all of the other stuff is just junk and so small. And when you think about how finite you are and how and you think in terms of eternity, it'll change your perspective on this racial issue. And then you can kind of rise above it. Because if you think about it, we're all just really, if you want to get biblical, He formed Adam out of dirt. We're all arguing, and you're all upset, hot and bothered, and full of bitterness and anger because of dirt. That is so petty, and it is so beneath you. And I would encourage every person that is hung up on race, whether you're black, white, or other, to rise above that.
Or they could just stop calling us and police their own neighborhoods.
Everyone should get an AR-15.
I mean,